right, we will call the March 17th, 2022 Curriculum Committee meeting to order. We have a few things on our agenda tonight, and I think Mr. Steve Peck's gonna kick us off with some out-of-state travel.
All right, great, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is a similar request from last year when we did the same travel to the same cross-country invitational in Illinois. It was approved back then, but just wanted to make sure as we go through an annual request. Limited cost. The coach bus is what the team would be traveling down to Illinois on a Saturday and then coming back the same day. The district covers the cost if it would be a school bus, and that's a normal procedure. But if the team wants to take a coach bus, then they pick up the extra cost. And through their own fundraising account within the building, Michael Buboltz, our cross-country coach, says that, we can cover the cost. As far as cost for food, he will also cover that cost, but parents usually provide food for the pre-race and the post-race for all of the kids that are competing. And it's a great event. It really is. It gets our kids, out of the state. We've got some talented runners, and a lot of times we run against the same kids all the time. So this is something that is a little bit different challenge, and it's a team bonding opportunity for the kids and the coaching staff. And it's pretty. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Like I said, we did it last year. You guys have any questions on anything?
I think it's a great opportunity, though, for kids. Some kids never get out of our state until they're well into their adulthood. So it's a great opportunity. And I can't believe it's been a year already, and we're already coming back with this.
Right, because we joked about it being like 5 miles out of state last
Right.
Yes, we did. It seems like almost like last month, but no, I think it's a great opportunity. So,
all right. If there's no other questions, I'd entertain a motion for approval. Well, to move it on to the full board.
yeah, I make that motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Then we can move that on to the full board for our next meeting. You're welcome to stay for a riveting math discussion.
I understand, but I have some dancers that I need to see.
It really is kind of a balance, right? Dancers or math?
I may want to stay.
We won't tell your kids.
No. She understands. Thank you, guys.
Have fun.
Have a fun evening.
503. Pam, you want?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, thanks.
All right.
All right, so the next thing on our agenda is looking at our secondary math updates. And I know Lori's here, and Pam and Jason have a little to throw in, I think. So yeah, who's going to start us?
I'll start us off. I'm just going to be referencing the document that's attached in the board book. And so the first thing I want to highlight is the fact that Lori and I have continued since we last met, working with our math coaches, teachers, and administrators, and this resident expert in the house named Lori Williams to continue to have discussions and create plans for the future of math. And since we last met, we've revised slightly and added a piece to this document, 2 pieces. Much of it has not been changed, and we'll highlight what has and has not been changed, okay? And so the first kind of paragraphs there, those 2 paragraphs, have not been changed at all. I just want to highlight and remind everyone that there's really 3 pieces in those opening paragraphs. The first piece is that math is important. That's what it says, right? And the second piece is that talks about ambitious instruction. And that's really founded in our standards. Our state standards have grown in rigor, increased in rigor. And so we want to be adaptive to the increased rigor. And the third piece really is about equitable instruction. And last time we talked about, and I just want to remind the team that when we think about equitable instruction, we're thinking about providing every student with what they need when they need it. And really developing students and empowering students to be confident in problem solving, communicating in that content, in this case math, taking risks, right, and failing forward, but doing it in a safe environment. So that's the highlights of those opening paragraphs. And the next couple sections, professional development and enrichment, I'm going to turn it over to Lori Williams. And thank you, Lori.
Thank you. The actual wording in those two sections has not changed. The document is identical to what you've seen in the past. I just wanted to give you some updates because we've already started that work. So the professional development plan for next year, the first draft was put together by the teacher leaders, the SLLs, and the math coaches at the secondary level. And they brought it to Jason and me. And we looked at it, we listened to their sales pitch and we found that they had surveyed every single math teacher in the district, gave them the opportunity for input. And what they came up with from those surveys was a desire to continue with the collaborative PLC process. They know that that's beneficial for them. And the student engagement that's on here is a part of that plan, as well as common formative assessing and using those formative assessments in a way that helps to engage students in goal setting, in understanding what their learning should be, and helping them to be reflective about where they are, what they need next. So to increase the student engagement in their own learning.
Lori, can you give me an example of what a goal might look like for a student?
Absolutely. So in 6th grade, they get the introduction to negative numbers. And when we first introduce that, we do that with numbers that feel whole, like -1, -2 versus fractions and other things in between it, right? So the goal in the standard is that the students can add and subtract rational numbers, meaning both negatives and positives. But we might have the students looking at, first, do you have a goal of just understanding negative whole numbers? That's not mathematically correct to exactly say it that way, and then work with fractions, and then work with decimals. And so their goals would be to increase their knowledge toward that, knowing that by the end of the unit or the chapter, they have to be proficient with all. So it would be having a learning target for today being about those negative numbers and learning how to use them on a number line. And they know by the end, they're going to use fractions and decimals and as well. Is that?
Yeah, that helps. So they
Okay.
know what's coming. They
Yes.
just don't understand it yet. And it's allowing them the ability to verbalize what they're supposed to know and how
Yes.
far they want to get.
Right.
That's essentially
Yes.
the thing. Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
Thank you.
And then the formative feedback in that piece is helping the kids to know, based on the evidence in their work, what they have done correctly, what they should continue to do, and to give them suggestions about what their next move is to move toward that goal. So that would be formative feedback. Okay. The next part on the top of page 2 is the enrichment part. And we know that that's a goal for ourselves and for the department. And what the math coaches and I started doing just yesterday was putting together some benchmark descriptors of the standards that are more in kid language. But they're also pieces so that we know at the end of the first quarter, the kids should be able to do this. If we know that, we have evidence of that, they should be getting some enriched things moving forward. But those descriptors then allow the teachers to know when those kids have started to develop that and when they're going to be in need of that enrichment. So we wanted to make that a very clear for the teachers, for the kids, for the parents, right? What are the expectations and what's the evidence of that? And then once that's met, then we can start to do the enrichment. Okay?
Thank you, Lori. The next section is that proposed criteria. And we know that this was a section that we had a lot of good conversations with the team last time. And we brought those conversations back to both the math coaches, SLLs, and administrators. And this reflects no change from our last conversation. And we know that it is rigorous. And we talked about that last time. And we know that in the past, I think we all know that there was an opportunity to do a better job of communicating with our stakeholders of the criteria. And so we're hoping tonight we have some support from you, and after spring break, we would start that communication plan, right? And we would work with our math coaches and administrators to really make sure that all students and parents are aware of the criteria moving forward, and before we start identifying students. But it was unanimous that, again, math coaches, SLLs, administrators feel really good about this criteria. The next section is completely new. So this section was not part of our last conversation. I'm going to spend more time on this section. And so it's just an intro, a couple sentences there that really set the stage for our why. And so there's a couple parts here. One is that sentence 2 starts with standards outlined in grades 6, 7, and 8. The standards, what we're seeing is the standards in grades 6, 7, 8 are really connected. That makes sense, middle school, right? And so the standards look different, connected certainly, but look different once we get to algebra, geometry, and beyond. And so we also know that algebra is a gatekeeping course for our high school students. So knowing and realizing that our standards at 6, 7, 8 are inherently connected, algebra being that gateway course, and kind of separating itself from those middle level standards, what our team, again, math coaches, SLLs, administrators, are proposing, looking for your support, is to compact at the 6th and 7th grade levels, and then have algebra at the 8th grade as a standalone. I'm gonna let that settle in, and I'm gonna tell you what we do now, just as a reminder. So right now, our 6th grade students are getting 6th grade math. And our 7th grade students that are in compacted get 7, 8 algebra, right? This proposal is saying that we'd like to do 6, 7, 8 at the 6th and 7th grade years. So we're just moving the compaction down. And it allows 8th grade to be a standalone algebra course. And again, the rationales, the standards at the middle level are really connected. Algebra is a standalone. And I think our data, that longitudinal data that we looked at, shows some gaps in our algebra coverage. And this would afford our professionals to really focus in on algebra at the 8th grade year. And when those students are successful, they join Lincoln or McKinley in a geometry course. Okay. There's a couple asterisks there, just thinking about how would we implement this and not lose any students along the way. So the first asterisk, I had to verify with Laura that we didn't mess this up this morning. So the first asterisk says that for the 22-23 school year, next school year, we would have to, and we would like to, offer compacted to next year's 7th grade. Because if we start this new pathway next year, we lose the 7th grade course. So we'd offer the compacting to 7th grade. They kind of follow the old model for those 2 years. We'd also like to offer compacted to 6th grade, and they would then be the first group to follow this proposed model. And then the years subsequent, we'd only offer to 6th grade as the starting point. So we're just thinking about how do we not lose any opportunities to provide compacting to any grade level. So that's what those asterisks highlight. I said a lot. Questions on that,
Yeah,
please?
I have two questions. So, kids not in compacted math would get the algebra piece their 9th grade year, right?
Yes.
So this would put our 8th grader, or kids in compacted math 1 year ahead, just like they are now. What was my other? I lost it. Sorry. Do you have any questions?
I'm just wondering, what does this do? So when we do compacted math, like who would be teaching it? What does it do to our number of courses for the kids and stuff? Like as far as, you know, and how many kids do we see like taking compacted math? And you say we offer it, but do they have to follow all the previous criteria that was stated?
Sure. So just from a scheduling standpoint or student standpoint, I should say, it'll be messy, and I'll define that for 1 year, right? Because next year we'd have 6th graders in the new kind of pathway. We'd have 7th graders starting compacting in our current model. And then we have 8th graders that are this year's 7th graders finishing that comp. So it'd be messy for that one, probably 2 years, right? Because next year's 7th graders become 8th graders. So it'd take a while for us to get to this pathway. So I just wanted to say that. We know there's staffing implications, right? And so Lori and I met with Mark and Joyce Greenwood Arts to talk about what that could look like. We have to we have to work through the criteria to see how many students, but there's a commitment to the staffing piece.
So like, for example, this year we have approximately, in just one school, I'm just thinking Wilson, because it's the only one that I know, we had 6 students taking compacted, correct? As 7th graders.
Correct.
Okay. So probably give or take the same type of numbers. I would assume that we're kind of looking at about the same. I mean, we're not looking for a certain number, but like typically maybe that's kind of give or take what percentage of kids would be in the compacted math then.
I think you'll see in the, when we get down to the success on that last page, the measures of success are also to increase that number.
Okay. And are we considering like maybe, and I see both sides of this, having 6th and 7th grade compacted math separate but taught at the same time? Have we thought about
What
that?
do you mean about?
Say the same teacher teaches both 6th grade compacted, 7th grade compacted in the same classroom at the same hour, but it's 2 separate groups. Have we thought about doing something like that? I know it's really difficult though, so.
I would say that
I
we've
just
talked
wondered.
about that, but we have not finalized any model, right?
Oh,
We've
okay.
talked about that.
Yeah.
We've talked about we're getting really good at virtual. So if there's 2 students at Washington, 7 at Wilson, could we do some virtual and
Oh,
the
that's
teacher
interesting.
flip-flop?
Okay.
Depending on numbers, could we just dedicate staff? So we've talked about all those options. We have to work through the criteria and make decisions there.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting option to
Yeah.
think about.
So I remembered my question. So this year, I think we spent like Q1 and kind of did some sifting during Q1. Would they hit the ground running? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yep.
then the incoming 6th graders would base theirs on 5th grade forward exam, right?
And some years prior, yeah.
Yes.
All right, I
And
just
that's,
want to make sure I had it
Yep.
straight.
thank you.
Let's see.
Stacy, I see your hand. I just want to say that we know that if this is a good plan moving forward, we have support. We already have time scheduled with our math coaches right after break, whether it's, no, let's revise this again, or let's start executing. So that would be part of the plan. Stacy, please.
Yeah, so I wondered you stated before that the criteria has not changed, correct? This is the same criteria, the 80%, all that is the same as last year?
No, same as the proposed criteria from when we last met. So I'm losing track of months, but it feels like January.
Yeah, I think
So,
so.
so that's what I was in reference to. This is significantly different than criteria for this year.
Okay, can you give me an example of what the advanced scores were? Was it closer to 90% of the sub-scores in the forward?
No, this year, because the previous year's forward exam measured all parts of math,
Mhm.
all of the different like geometry and statistics and all of those things. But we didn't teach all of those during COVID. We only used the areas that we had taught and really emphasized. So it wasn't 90%, it was the areas that we taught.
Okay.
So I believe there was 3 of 5 kind of domains that
Mhm.
we looked for 2 of them to be proficient and at least 1 to be advanced, I believe. That's right.
Okay.
So it wasn't a percent.
Right.
The comprehensive math assessment and also the attitude survey, were those the same, or did you change those as well?
We did not use the comprehensive math exam for this year. We did use the math interest and attitude. So again, this proposal here matches January, not this year.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. And I'm just curious, was how much change was there in January to the one that we used for this year?
Significant.
Okay.
As Laura stated, we had to be flexible given what we could cover last year. So we literally looked at 3 of 5 domains to identify a group of students. Then we offered the interest and attitude survey as the next kind of door opener for that.
Okay. Was the attitude survey that was used last year as well, right? Or for this
Yes.
year, I should say.
Yep.
Was it also a 3.34 or higher?
I believe it was slightly lower.
Yeah, I think it was maybe right at 3, just a little bit above 3.
Okay. What else I wanted to ask? So kids that were not in it this year, based on this rollout of 6th, 7th, would they be able to get into the compacted then this coming school year?
This year's 7th graders would not be offered to join compacted 8th grade, no. This year's 6th graders would be, and that's kind of asterisk number 1 there.
But this year's 7th graders would end in the same spot as they would whether they would have been in compacted or not, right?
But we have 6 students that would end up with algebra.
End up with
Everyone
algebra.
else would be the same, yeah. Did I answer your question, Stacy?
I think so. So the 7th graders that were not didn't qualify for compacted would not be able to do algebra next year.
That is accurate.
Okay.
Any other?
I think that's it.
Okay.
I have a what if question. So because we are setting the standards really high to get into compacted math, right, higher than ever before, what if we get into it next year? And this is a big what if, okay? But I'm just saying, what if we get into next year and we see that we're not even meeting, like, say, state or national averages with number of kids who should be in it, that we've set our standards too high? Would we relook at that then and take that into consideration for the classes next year?
I would tell you that it has been, for many reasons, a true blessing to have math coaches. Right? And they are working hard in our classrooms to grow instructional strategies. They are working hard to grow the collaborative process. And they are working hard to make sure the right students are in the right places and getting what they need. And so I say that because we're always going to be evaluating our systems,
Okay.
right? And being flexible in the best interest of kids. So, yeah.
Just because it is we are setting the standards very high now, and
Absolutely.
we want to make sure we have that balance as well as possible, right? We've set the right kids in there, but
So,
yet we want to see some kids in there,
Mhm.
so,
Absolutely.
that's where I'm saying, I hope we look at it again and continue to do that, like you're saying we do. So.
And again, as we conclude later on, we'll get to the measures of success. And that'll be a pulse check for us and we'll share it with you throughout, each year. I'm going to turn back over to Lori to walk us through pages 3 through 5-ish with those charts again.
Okay.
Please.
So page 3, the chart changed from the one in January. And that's because we updated it. Oh, I'm sorry. The next one on page 4 changed. So page 3 has the typical pathway for the majority of our students. And those students have that opportunity to get to pre-calculus, which is even Algebra 2 is college and career ready. So the majority of students take that pathway. If you look at page 4, this is the one that we changed to update to match the proposal of moving compacted to 6th and 7th grade rather than 7th and 8th grade. So now this reflects that compacting 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math into 2 years and algebra as a standalone class in 8th grade. And then it continues like it did for compacting before with geometry, algebra 2, and then all of the classes that are beyond algebra 2 as their options and match what you want to do, right, and your pathway.
Are AP Stats and Calculus the only 2 AP classes we offered in the math line of math even years ago? Or do we have other classes?
We didn't have AP Stats even. We had a
Okay.
statistics class, but it was not AP
Okay.
until just a few years ago.
Okay. I didn't remember it either, but that doesn't mean I'm remembering correctly, so.
Yep.
Okay.
So now we
good.
have
This is added.
significantly more college credit classes
That's great.
than what we had. Any other questions on that one on 4? And then, Stacy?
Yeah, I just wanted to, and this might be a typo, but I was just wanting to make sure. So on that, one of that second asterisk there, it talks about APCalc, but APCalc is not in the diagram. Is that supposed to be, or is it supposed to say AP Stats?
AP Calculus is on the right-hand, well, it's on the right-hand side in grade 11 and 12. On charts beginning with page 4.
Yeah, I guess I was looking at that, the typical pathway successful
Yes.
completion equals college ready, that
Yes.
one?
Yeah, that one does not have calculus in it. Oh, so the asterisk things, yes, you are correct. That is an error on my part.
Okay, so that shouldn't
Yes.
say AP, that shouldn't say AP statistics? Because it says pre-calc or AP
yeah,
stats.
no, actually, there
table.
just shouldn't be an asterisk on page 3
Okay.
for either AP course.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Great catch, thank you. And then page 4 has the compacted, and page 5, has all of the different options for accelerating in different places, even if you're not compacting. So like if we talked just briefly about those 7th graders that may not have 8th grade algebra, there's all kinds of pathways to get to college credit classes, even if you do not compact in middle school.
Do we give these, these diagrams to like parents and students on a regular basis? So they know what's where?
Yes, they're not in this type of format in the course bulletin, but they are there. Like all of the options for post Algebra 2 are there, as well as the school counselors being aware of when they have their regular meetings with the students. Beginning, they do the 4-year plans.
It's great, we saw it all.
There you go.
It just seems like it would be it could be really beneficial for people to look at it as a whole and like to just slide it into that book. I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too is, this is kind of maybe a little bit of a PR thing, is just, I think it's good for parents and students to see all that we're offering, not just like listed in a catalog, but to be like, here's this broad spectrum of different ways you can go about this for them to actually see that instead of just being listed, I think it might, it'd be a positive thing.
Absolutely.
We know our counselor group is one of the stakeholder groups that we'll need to circle with, and not specific to the chart, but make sure they can speak to parents and students too.
Right, but it helps to have that visual.
Absolutely.
And like, it just seems like it would be a really nice addition to things, especially you went to all that work to put it together, why not use it instead of just for us? So, just a suggestion, I could see it being useful.
Stacy, please.
Yeah, are we doing, how many kids are dually enrolled now, or are they not doing that in ninth grade, 10th grade?
What do you mean by dually enrolled?
I'm sorry, the
Oh,
concurrent.
the concurrent enrollment? I personally, I don't know of any right at the moment. I know of students who have done that
Okay.
in the past, but I couldn't give you names of anybody right at this moment.
I would just think that would be that's one of, to me, a deterrent here is I can't imagine taking 2 math classes concurrently just to catch up, because I wasn't allowed to be in the compacted math. I can't imagine that would be real popular, but I don't know.
I don't know the number now, but I know that as a high school principal, we saw a small percentage of students taking 2 math courses regularly.
Okay. At our high school or?
A different district.
Okay.
I do think the more popular route is the middle one on page 5, where they take the compacted course, the Algebra II pre-calculus. That enrollment is quite high.
You said the middle, where it's not 9th grade algebra, geometry, Algebra II.
Yeah, the Algebra II pre-calc accelerated compacted class as a junior, that one is very popular. And we run at least 1 section, and many years we run 2 full sections of that. And then we have more students in APCalc after that.
So really the right and left ones are really for somebody that like super wants math.
Yeah.
Because they would want to they'd want to get the most college credits they possibly could, starting in 11th grade, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other questions at this point? I'm going to just turn our attention to page 6 then, and measures of success. And this section is completely new as compared to January. So again, working with math coaches, teacher leaders, and administrators, I had some conversations about when we were sitting, enjoying, and the success of this work in 3, 4, 5 years. What would it look like? How would we measure the success? And so these 3 rose to the top through those conversations. Number 1 talks about increasing the number of students demonstrating proficiency in these skills and understandings. And won't read them to you, but those are the same categories that we spoke of earlier from the forward exam, right? So we're looking to increase the number of students that are proficient or better. And then 9th through 11th, we're really speaking of those domains that are really assessed through the Aspire and ACT. And so we're using those measurements as a way to measure the success of our math instruction. And then number 3 talks about we want to grow, the goal is to increase the number of students taking math, any math, above or beyond Algebra II. And so when we start thinking about a comprehensive K-12 math program, we're really confident and excited about our bridges work, K through 5, Really excited about this opportunity at the middle level, along with some of the PD that we continue to grow, and similar at the high school level. So we'll have multiple measures of success over time that, again, would be used to evaluate and share with all stakeholders. And so really looking tonight for your support on this plan. And we have a spring break coming up here, and if we have that support, we'll start working on next steps. And those next steps, certainly not all of them, but we want to connect certainly with our math coaches and administrators and teachers. We want to finalize those professional development plans and our plan to grow the enrichment. Really start a comprehensive advertising campaign, right? Making sure our stakeholders know, and then we'd execute the plan. And so, just looking for your support.
Are there any other questions about that proposal?
Yeah, I guess I want to just talk a little bit about the enrichment. So for those students, we've brought it up a couple times about the students that are not, I'm going to use the phrase, I know it's not eligible, but not being allowed to be in these programs if they want to. What are we doing as far as enrichment? What is that going to look like?
The math coaches put together a sample calendar that looked at one unit from one grade level to try and play out, like, how could this look and what kind of professional development would we need in order to pull that off for all chapters, for all grade levels. So what they did is the calendar listed all the lessons in the chapter. It listed for each lesson, where are the challenge problems that the class doesn't usually do as a whole that would provide one level of enrichment. Then they also listed outside resources that would give students more depth of understanding about what that section teaches, from places like Illustrative Math is a very well-known challenge kind of site. Trying to think of what the others, Joe Boulder's websites. So we had places where we would put these calendars together. First, we're going to get feedback from the staff about, like, what format is going to be best for you to make it usable, but then put together either as math coaches team or get some input and some help through summer curriculum writing for the teachers who teach it, to put the calendars together so that it's there at their fingertips on a regular basis to be able to provide that enrichment. And I believe the middle school levels have enrichment time. They have, sometimes they call it WIN, Hawk time, Wolf time, I like all the different kinds of places. It was really interesting. I was with the math coaches yesterday, and Derek reported they've been really looking at those formative assessments, and he had one grade level team that was really super excited about the data that they brought to the PLC, because during that meeting, they look at who's doing really well, who already knows it, and who needs some additional reteaching or more practice time or whatever. And he said for the first time, their enrichment groups during that time are going to be larger than the scaffolded groups. And they were really excited about it. So I think the PLC process, and as we get farther and farther into that and we get better at that, like, we're also looking for those enrichments and finding the time and making sure that they get out to kids.
So day one in the fall, they will have
Yeah.
those enrichment activities
Right.
in place.
So they're there, and then when the data shows we need them,
Mhm.
then we can put them into place. And you actually get instruction from a teacher on those then, rather than, I know a long time ago, it was a kind of go in the hall and do this packet, right? So this actually, during that win time, gives you an instructor who's going to take you into those enrichments.
And is that the math coach doing that?
In some cases, but in most times, that enrichment win kind of time is I call you to my classroom kind of thing. It's very flexible in and out. So it depends on who needs what when.
Okay.
The
I
one
did-
concern that I have, oh, sorry, Stacy, go ahead.
I just wanted to, and it's probably better for you to go first, but I have a question about math, but not related to higher level math.
Sure.
Okay, I'll go quick then, hopefully. My one concern still is kind of the aptitude and attitude survey, because that's kind of an ambiguous thing, right? Like whether they have the desire to move forward in math or they see the importance of that. So is that not kind of an ambiguous survey, and we're asking them to know what their desires are at a fairly young age? I think it could be an indicator, but should that be?
So we've taken the test.
Yeah, I've never seen it, so
And
that's part of
it's
my
very
asking.
much a lot of those non-cognitives of, do you like math? Because if you hate math, maybe this isn't the best idea, right? And it's not quite that simplistic, but it really does kind of look at, it's an interest survey. A lot of it is. And from my perspective as a parent, those are the questions that jumped out at me, which was one of the determining factors for one of my kids. It was like, math isn't my jam. you
And
know?
and if it's not your jam, like the likelihood of you, like you're compacted, which means that, you're looking at that pathway, right? And you have to do 3 credits of math, right? So you have to go beyond Algebra II into one of those higher level classes, just even to get your 3rd credit. And if your passion isn't math, is that where you want to spend your evenings studying and doing homework and stuff? If your passion is science or social studies or performing arts or visual arts or whatever, like one of the things I used to counsel the students on in that Excel role that I had is it's good to be challenged. We don't want you bored. Like you have the right to learn every day. Absolutely. But when you start to get to high school and you're looking for levels of challenge, the math itself is going to be challenging. And you want a nice balance of, I can do the sports I want, I can do the arts I want, I can have the job I want, I can have homework time, I can balance my life and not be stressed to ends of the earth and doing homework till midnight or 1 o'clock. Like all of it is about balance. And if you want that passion in school where you're going to get homework time and you're going to really delve in and study and everything, you kind of want it to be in something you love, right?
I would also say there's another positive implication for having math coaches. Those folks will help us navigate the interest inventory individually with students.
Okay.
And so we're having those conversations versus think this.
Just here, yeah, that's
And
huge.
so,
Okay. All right, thanks.
Anything else about the compacted math or the proposal that's in board book? I think we're good to move forward. It doesn't sound like there's any real big concerns. So,
Great, thank you. Stacy, did you want to ask your math question here? You want to connect offline? What's best for you?
I think it'll be quick. If you don't mind me jumping in, I just wanted to know about. I remember us talking about that Bridges is younger, and that we don't. Remind me, do we have a strict curriculum for high school math? I thought the answer was yes.
Strict. We have a
Well,
regional.
like the Bridges program. Do we have a math program that we use for high school?
Yes.
Okay.
For algebra.
Is that successful, the curriculum that we're using?
I would say it is successful in that it is connected well to bridges.
Okay.
The model of getting students to explore, to fail forward, to talk mathematically, to come up with multiple ways to solve a problem, aligns well with bridges. And so that in that vein, I would say it is very successful. Are there opportunities to continue to grow and the way we execute that? Always, right? And that's why we have things like a professional development plan and math coaches to help us execute that.
Right. And so, I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is, do we feel like our curriculum that we're using in the high school is promoting proficiency? Or have we looked at that at all and said, we've been doing it this way for a while and it's not the best?
I would say a couple things. The last question you asked is, have we talked about different curriculum or resource? The answer is yes. So we had Lori and I had some informal conversations with a number of high school and middle school teachers. It was probably bad timing, to be quite honest. It was earlier this year at a time when stress levels were high. And the feedback was, better not do that right now, right? It was just bad timing. We also had conversations with middle and high school math coaches and middle and high school administrators. They're split, to be quite honest. And so we want to continue to have that conversation. And if we do anything, it'll be multi-year plan, just like Bridges, right? We want to do some learning about great math instruction, and then begin to play with it, just like we did in Bridges, and then execute the actual implementation. So I guess the answer right now is we're not planning that right now, but the discussions are going on. And the final thing I would say on this piece would be, we've talked about with people, there is no silver bullet resource, right? There is no resource that is the answer. We have resources to commonize some of the work we do, promote math instruction at Washington, looking pretty similar to Wilson. I think that's fair to our students, moral obligation to our students. But how we implement those resources is strategies and professional development opportunities with the adults. And that's the piece that we want to focus in on.
Okay, and then just one other question. I'm so sorry.
No.
Are we doing any kind of measurement or assess? I shouldn't even say that, because I know we probably are, and that's the answer. But what are we doing when we're assessing the losses that happened during COVID? And how are we catching those students up?
I guess I would speak in generals first.
Yeah.
Right? And so, again,
and I'm also making an assumption, right? I'm making an assumption that there are big losses. So that's where that's coming from. I'm just curious about that.
Yep. So I would start with that assumption. I think 10 years ago, we had students that had gaps in their mathematical understanding. This year, we have students with gaps in their mathematical understanding. And so we want to continue to double down, and we talk about it incessantly, about the importance of core instruction, tier 1 instructional strategies. We know, the research shows, the data shows that the importance of what occurs in the regular classroom cannot be overstated. And so whether that resource is Bridges or some other math expression which we had in the past, it at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, right? What matters is the math instruction that we provide our students and the level we can inspire our students, engage our learners in some of the things I talked about, talking, exploring, failing, finding multiple ways to solve a problem. And it is our work, Lori, Pam, Jason, Jen Schultz from a literacy standpoint, to grow our professionals to do that at a high level for every student.
Because in the end, it's just a resource. The professionals are the one that
Right.
teaches the content, not the published book.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
And so that's really high level general, right, Stacy? But we want to continue to double down on that core instructional piece and always think about what we can do to, for, and with students that do have gaps, right? Whether it's, as Lori talked about, what I need, or hawk time, or wolf packing, whatever it is. Let's get really good at what are the standards we want to cover in the classroom, identify the students that aren't, and then develop a plan for each one of those students to grow. And starting with the classroom, but adding other opportunities outside as well.
I would also add that I think we have an increased amount of our teacher teams really looking at that classroom data on a consistent basis for those, gap identifications, and then trying some strategies to intervene and then monitoring that. So for example, when our teachers at the elementary level are getting some of that number corner data, they're looking at that and then they're saying, okay, what are those different skills that students are missing? How can we intervene? And so you might walk into a classroom, in the kindergarten classroom, where students who miss the geometry standards around shapes are getting some extra time with the teacher really working on strategies to help them understand shapes. And then the teachers are coming back with that data again to their teams to say, are we seeing any growth? So they're doing multiple interventions, multiple assessments to really try to address the gaps that they're seeing as they're seeing them. And I think, we have some groups that the data that they're seeing is they're having success, and then they move on to the next, right? The next skill that's showing some weakness, and try to identify that. So that's exciting too, that our teachers are feeling much more comfortable with how to gather the data, how to look at it, and then how to do some of those interventions along the way. And our math coaches, as Jason indicated, are guiding a lot of that. They're helping them to say, how do we review the data? What do you look for in the data? And then giving them some ideas about, you could try this, or I could come in and model a strategy for you to try, and then we'll collect the data after you try it, and we'll look at it again and see if we've got any growth.
In addition, yep, and I'm just going to add one more addition that K-8, we structured into the regular week of instruction what we call data days. So we prioritized what learning needs to happen this year out of this year's material, and we put days in for the teachers to go back and teach last year if they need it. So we can use that data. So for example, I know the numbers from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade because I'm coaching with those teams right now, and they have 10 data days during 4th quarter coming up. So that's one a week where they can go in and put in a lesson that might be needed from a previous year to build background before they teach this year's content. Or they can look at the data from a screener for chapter 5 and say, you know what, we're going to use 5 of those data days. We're going to do a whole week of last year's stuff before we even start the next chapter. So that's another piece that we structured in K-8. And then the algebra classes also have a double enrollment. They have an algebra strategies class that they can take to back up the students.
And is that happening in the high school as well?
Yes. Yeah, that's the algebra strategies is the concurrent enrollment at the high school level.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And we know, Stacy, and that this work is really hard, right? Educating students of all abilities, all passions, all interests is really hard work, and it's not getting easier. And so I would be remiss not just to say that our classroom teachers, our teachers, are working really hard in the classroom to execute those great instructional strategies. They're working really hard to collaborate and use data. And we are so fortunate to have math coaches and reading folks digging in, rolling up their sleeves and helping that work. And so it is hard work, but we have the right people doing the right work. And we're really
I believe it. I mean, even if you have to take a week to do that, it's a week that they're not doing something that they were supposed to be doing that week. I mean, I can't imagine. I just cannot imagine I can't imagine, and I would not want to do it. So yeah, I no criticism on what's happening. I'm just was curious on what we're doing, because I'm sure it's there. So
yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Okay, the last thing on our agenda was to answer any questions about the student engagement survey or the parent engagement survey. And did you receive any
We had a couple,
questions? Okay.
and Pam and I planned a couple just highlights that are that were above and beyond kind of that overview.
Mhm.
And so we can do that now if time allows. But
Sure.
okay. Pam, did you want to do student first?
Sure. So just a couple of things I wanted to point out that weren't necessarily evident in the presentation, but when the teams looked at it, so for example, the counseling team met this summer and they looked at the survey data, and through their analysis of the data, they really centered on that connectedness. They noticed that kind of across the board, but especially in some of our different subgroups, they were seeing that the numbers for connectedness were not going in the right direction. And so what they decided to do was to think about, okay, how can we affect some change in that? And as a counseling team, they agreed that they would each in their own buildings take a look at those subgroups of students, do some kind of baseline assessment with the students, asking them a few of those connectedness questions in a different way, just to get a pulse for who needs some additional support on that front. And then they were going to plan some interventions for that, and things like having regular conversations with those students just to make sure that they feel a part of the school community and they're finding their niche. At the high school level, are students engaging in some of the activities and maybe taking them for a little stroll after school and saying, hey, how about we go together and we check out this club or this organization? So each in their own way, trying to find a way to help that. And then their plan was to build together some regular data collection. So they've been doing that, and then when they come together on those staff development days, they're sharing what evidence they have towards their efforts to build that connectedness and what impact it's having on the students. And so I wanted to mention that because they spent a lot of time really digging into that and created a pretty interesting action plan. I know they're excited to see the full year and how that goes and what the impact is going to be when the survey is given next year. It came a little earlier this year, and it didn't give them a lot of time to affect as much change, but they'll look forward to then when we get next year's results in the fall to see if there's been any change. So, and then the other group that I wanted to mention was for our deans of students and our student support leaders. They too took a look at that survey, and because they knew the counselors were really focusing in on that connectedness piece, they took a look at that citizenship indicator and said, there's things in there like that relationship focus, students being role models of how to do things well, how to follow the rules, how to make responsible decisions. And so they centered their focus on what could they do to kind of help bring that along for students. They aren't as far along in their actual formal action planning on that, but definitely have that as their focus and wrote a mission to really take a look at how they're engaging students in that, but also just engaging the school community in that relationship piece and being real responsive to each other. So I did want to mention those two things in terms of two groups that are in particular working on the data. And then certainly our buildings, as they get the data, will incorporate that into their summer work. When they do their data digs, they not only look at the academic pieces, but they'll also look at the student engagement data, because that sometimes gives them some indicators of that balance between what they need to focus on in the classroom, but then what do they need to focus on in their school-wide community to make sure all students are really feeling like they belong. That's one of those terms that over and over you hear students talking about. I feel like I belong, or I don't feel like I belong. And so really wanting to bring that forward. The other thing I want to mention, Stacy, you asked a question about, do the demographics in the student survey reflect ours? And for the most part, it's pretty close. The only subgroup that's a little bit lower representation in our survey data than in our demographics would be our Black students. For some reason, their population was a little bit lower. And you know, it's interesting because the counselors picked up on that right away when they said, boy, that's surprising, considering what we know about some of our concerns about that group of students, that they questioned that. And then they did notice as well that number seemed a little bit lower. So
yeah, that's kind of why I asked the question, because it didn't seem like it fit.
Right. But the rest of the other groups really are pretty consistent. May give or take a few percentage points with our overall population. So
Okay, thank you.
that's kind of the student survey, unless you've got other questions about it. Just wanted to give you some ideas of how we're using the data now that we have it.
The other question I had was, what do they do in, I think it's on this one. What do they do in 5th grade that spikes there's a spike in, I think it's what they're looking forward to in the future. Is there something specific that they do that was like almost the highest when they're thinking about their future, and then it kind of goes down from there? And I wondered, is there something special we do during that year?
I don't know if there's anything special other than, well, I would say we got rock star 5th grade teachers, but the other part of it is, I think about the kids at 5th grade are getting a lot of pumping up, motivating for that transition to middle school. And the excitement of middle school really kind of being that corner turner for, I'm now getting closer to being that adult learner versus the young learner. So I think there's a little element of that, that in middle school, where some of those identity issues come into play, and students maybe start questioning a little bit more of, you know, who am I? What do I want to do? Where do I see? That plays, I think, a little bit more into some of that middle school dip that you see after 5th grade. So
it's on that. Yeah, it's on that academic and career planning index by grade level page. I mean, it's higher. It's higher than
some of the first, you know, they're asked those
Choosing
questions.
electives at that time.
Yeah, and it's kind of the first time we're really asking them about some of that. And so that information, it's a little skewed in the fact that the questions are a little bit newer. And then as they get through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, there's multiple factors that play into it, but they've kind of answered some of those questions. And so, but I do think that there's a little bit of that, just that I'm excited about middle school. And then, you know, there's some challenges when students kind of start to figure out, like, hey, where do I fit? And my peers become maybe just a little bit more, there's more, right? There's more students, and there's more people to fit in with. And so those are challenges that I think our middle school leaders continually look at when they plan their transition, right? And welcoming in, you'll see, when you see the summer school offerings, you'll see a middle school bridges program. And part of that is to allow some of those 6th grade students to come in and just get used to that different environment, get used to, you know, some students, because when all of the students are there, it's a much larger population, because you've got multiple elementary schools that are feeding into both of our middle schools. So it's kids that they haven't seen before.
Sure.
Great question.
I also thought what was interesting too is the, and and I just would wonder why this happened. But some of these questions where we get low percentage, I mean, like when the one that says I use an academic and career plan to guide my decision, only 691 students answered that out of 2,200. And same way with I feel well prepared for college. So I'm just curious about what was going on with students that they wanted to skip those questions.
Some of those questions are only for our upper grade levels. So you have to remember, like the fourth grade students don't answer some of those questions. So that there's less, it's only certain groups of students that answer.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a difference, but we also don't stand, over the students when they're taking. So if they skip something, you might see a little discrepancy, but typically I think they answer as much as they can if they're offered it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought 2,200 was that. How much was it the last time we did it? I mean, I thought that was a pretty good sample.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty consistent.
Okay.
And what I would say is that our schools this year had a little bit easier time trying to get captive audiences to really take the engagement survey, where last year we had a little bit of an issue with, we had to push it out to students who were virtual and try to get some of that data in addition to students who were in the building. So it got a little bit of a more chaotic feel to it to try to get every student to do it. But our teachers, again, do a nice job of committing time to it, and our administrators help to follow up and remind students and staff to make sure that they take the time to engage in it.
I think for student survey, we've hovered right around 22, 23, 2,400, other than last year. Last year we had 1,366 only. So that was, that's the year that we will put an asterisk on forever. So.
I'm going to turn it over to you to just hit the highlights of some parent
Yes,
stuff.
thank you. I just wrote 4 things that I think are important to note as relates to our parent survey results. And the first is just some highlights around that gap analysis. Our team has spent a lot of time thinking and talking about that gap analysis. And so I wrote down 4 things. One is that our parents are saying reading, literacy, and vocabulary is the most important. And they said it, I think it's on a scale of 1 to 4, 3.72. They're saying that's important. Second is writing and grammar, 3.7. Math, 3.65. So we almost got the folks to understand how important math is. We're trying to get math to be number 1 next year. And then personal finance is number 4. And what's interesting to me is that the gap analysis is pretty similar for all, right? Reading, we're down 0.89, and that 0.89 means that 3.72 in importance, 2.83 of how we're doing from the perspective of the parent. So we're down 0.89, and we're down 0.95 in writing and grammar, down 0.82, that gap. Personal finance is 1.03. So what we talked about is really 2 things. One is that we really have to continue to grow those opportunities, right? Do a great job at math instruction, like we just talked about, and a great job with reading and writing and grammar. I think there's a second component that we talked about as compacted, is also communicating with folks about the great job and about the opportunities. So we'll talk to our principals about that, about how do we just communicate these communication cycles to our parents and students about here are those opportunities, here's how we're doing, and celebrate the successes, but also educate people about all the offerings. We have a lot of things going on, and we should be proud of them and sharing those opportunities. The next kind of thing I wrote down is there's a slide. I didn't write down the number of the slide, but it asked folks to tell us what is their vision for our district. And it's in the latter slides, and 65% of our parents said that preparing students for career and life after high school is their kind of vision for our district. And that aligns well, right? Because we have talked about things like the Phoenix, right? And college here and now, and youth apprentice, and work school to work. And that aligns perfectly with what our parents are saying is their vision. And the second is 48% said, well, I think our vision is developing well-rounded and confident learners. And you take a look at our engagement survey, we're measuring that. And we talk about how important co-curriculars are and how do we promote those opportunities. And how do we, Lee Tennis shared about data about community college and career readiness. And that matches, that makes me feel good. And 42% said, my vision is inspiring students to achieve their full potentials. And how exciting is it that our core values match that? And some of the works that we do in homeroom and advisory matches that. And then the last piece, 34% of our parents said helping students discover their interests. And certainly, again, I think about the academic career planning process, right? The ACP, we had Bonnie and Ashley here talking about ACPs, and again, back to homeroom and advisory. And just those things are connecting with what our parents are saying is their vision. So it's just something we should be proud of, all of us. I think Pam mentioned it, but I wrote down that our principals have seen this district level data, and we'll provide school level data as the spring kind of springs here, with the expectation that our principals and their leadership teams dig into that data over the summer. And that becomes part of that action plan process. And then Stacy, I think you asked a question about ESSER. Just a reminder that there was a list of possibilities of how we could use those ESSER dollars, and we asked parents to rank those. That data was shared with Mr. Holzman and Angela, and so they'll be using that as we plan accordingly. I think it's fair to say that Angela Erdman is kind of our point person. And any specific questions about that data, I haven't seen that data. Any specific questions about that data or how we're in the planning process, I think we'll go to Angela Erdman.
Oh, so yeah, that's so my question was that, so what you're saying, that was a totally different survey. It didn't come through this one.
It was included in here, Stacy. We put the questions in so parents weren't getting multiple surveys, but that section was separated into something that Angela has taken and Mark we're looking at to be able to use that information for that ESSER process. We included it in there because we didn't want the parents to have to get a separate survey to right after each other. And so school perceptions helped us to make sure we got that section into our survey along with their traditional survey for families.
Is there any other data wasn't presented here?
Not in terms of the traditional parent engagement survey. That was the only addition to the survey this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote down for the parent survey.
All right. Any other questions about those two surveys? Okay, then we've reached the end of our agenda. If you want to make a motion to adjourn, we can do that.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Stacy.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thanks, Stacy.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you staying, answering questions.
Great questions. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.
I was gonna ask.
4 minutes or 5 minutes. Taking my